Dr. Parvez Amir, thank you very much for granting this interview to Politics and Development magazine. You attended COP15 and you just attended COP16. Kindly tell me what was the outcome at COP16 and in what terms it was different positively or negatively from COP15.
I think COP15 in Copenhagen was a mega event. I mean, you have 192 leaders of the world getting together there, and COP16 in comparison was much smaller, with 45,000 people, and here maybe about 12 to 15,000 people. And the outcomes of COP15 were conceptual. It was setting a framework, providing a broader agenda that, okay, if we can achieve this, we would be on the right track. I think what COP16 has done, it has taken 30-40% of that accomplishment and it has put that in perspective in terms of financing, in terms of capacity building, in terms of furthering the cause of this forestry arena through RED. I think that's where I would measure some of the success. It's not a whole-time success, it is a step in the right direction. What we hope there is that in Durban, we'll be able to consolidate a lot of what has happened in COP16. My main worry still goes back to the Kyoto Protocol extension. If the Kyoto Protocol are not extended beyond 2012 and they start to expire, then even this effort would really be undermined. Then it would be a step backwards. But the hope is that within this 1 year, there's going to be a lot of backtracking, negotiation, pushing, and hopefully getting people on board and hopefully getting some commitment to get this Kyoto Protocol extended. I think that's the way I look at it.
What was the good news for Pakistan in COP16?
I think the good news for Pakistan is that there is money. There is going to be money available in the system. Starting off with about $30 billion and then getting into a larger framework, about $100 billion per annum. Pakistan has to establish itself both in terms of its case, in terms of its credibility, in terms of its institutions, to grab that money, parts of it which we realistically are on. We have recently come up with the need study. Myself, Malak Amin Aslam, our former Minister for Environment, we've tried to put together some preliminary cost estimates. What is the adaptation cost for Pakistan in the tune of somewhere about $8+ billion annually. So Pakistan now has a case. We need to take that case and we need to get our fair share so that we can get on with the job of adapting to climate change in Pakistan. Mitigation is one of our minor concerns, although we're very much into mitigation also.
CDKN through LEAD prepared some material for the negotiators, and you were also one of them. What is your biggest criticism on that material?
I think I wouldn't be critical on it. I would say that the material, I think, when we negotiated back in Copenhagen, we didn't have anything to fall back on. This was the first time that some institution through LEAD, through CDKN, they had put together some material in form of both briefs and policy briefs. I think those notes were, to me personally, were very helpful. I think they provided information on what is the state of the issue, what is Pakistan's position, negotiating position on the issue, and what do we want to sort of bring out of this Cancun meeting in COP16. So I personally found them fairly useful, and I think the other members which I had discussed with, they also found them useful, provided you were negotiating and you were seriously reading those briefs. If you are not negotiating and not reading, then for you it is a stack of paper.
If I request you to compare the level of understanding of this issue, climate change, within the political leadership vis-a-vis India, how would you make that comparison?
I think it's a fairly far-fetched comparison. India's leadership intellectually is leaps and bounds beyond us. If you look at the Prime Minister of India, is one of the sort of celebrated PhDs out of Oxford, bringing India's growth rate in the arena of 9 to 10%, and India is going places. We, on the other hand, we have what we call an intellectual deficit. And that runs across the board in the political system. If you look at other areas also, unfortunately, that's the way things stand over there. And as far as climate change is concerned, I don't think that for Pakistan this is amongst the top three priorities. Whereas for India, for China, for some of the other countries of the world, they are taking this as one of the lead priorities. You need to first of all recognize the problem, only then you can do something about it. And I think there is that lack of understanding and the lack of commitment on behalf of the political stage in Pakistan, which needs to be corrected.
How many experts do we have, by the way, on climate change in Pakistan?
Per se, very few, maybe less than a dozen or so. I mean, then there are cross-cutting disciplines which are also working in climate change. And that capacity, I think, can be very rapidly developed. You can, I mean, there are disciplines.
How many should we have at least?
I think you should have people, at least in the core intellectual group, the science-based group, at least a few hundred, to my mind. And you need at least a dozen or more institutions which exclusively, in applied terms, focus on the issues of climate change. And over here we have one center, the Global Impact Study Centers. It's a very, very small, minuscule effort from the government. At least it's there, so we are at least grateful for that part of it. But I think you really need to build up that capacity and build it up very rapidly.
Would you like to tell that which organization in NGO sector are doing a good job?
I think there are several. I think Lead Pakistan is taking leadership. IUCN is another one. WWF amongst the. Then there are some institutions in the civil society. Oxfam is another one, and which are really recognizing the issue and coming up with SDPI, these Sustainable Policy Development Institute, I would say. But then these are, most of them are Islamabad based. That's not where we need the effort. We need the effort in Rajanpur. We need it in Karachi on our coast. We need it on our glaciers. We need to move out.
Is it? Were the 2010 floods caused by climate change?
I think
we just saw a flood in Australia, which was on a bigger magnitude, but
I think
the loss was not so much.
I think there's a lot of controversy whether you exclusively attach the floods in Pakistan to climate change. I think climate change had a lot to do with that, but the rising temperatures in the Indian Ocean, the storming 50-60,000 feet towering type of cloud systems which now develop. Earlier our cloud systems are 3 to 8,000 feet. Now our cloud systems are 50 to 60,000 feet. So the circumstances partly contributed by the changes in the hydrological cycle. They contributed these floods, and Pakistan suffered immensely. Mind it, changes in climate change the amount of precipitation which comes into the system. That means rainfall, snowfall, higher temperatures, evapotranspiration. They don't per se create floods. Floods get created because of management of system. If you don't have dikes, if you don't have good canal systems, if you have not been taking care of your flood management over the last 30 years, and immediately when you get excess water, if that water overflows, then you're going to have a flooding situation.
We are in the process of making a policy on climate change. What kind of policy a country like Pakistan should have?
I am biased in this area. My feeling is policies that originate from the people, which are through a stakeholder process, which come from the grassroots. They are policies which are owned. Policies which are made by federal governments or by an individual consultant or a team of consultants, and they represent a certain particular viewpoint. They are not policies which stand in the long term. The example of the water policy of Pakistan is very clear. For the last 10 years, we have good drafts which go back and forth. These are not policies which are owned by the people. And if people don't own that policy, what is the use of making that policy? It will change when the new government changes. It will change with that government. Only policies will hold which are coming from the grassroots, which carry the aspiration of the people. My feeling is that that's the type of policy which you sort of...
You are part of the task force on climate change.
I am part of the task force on climate change. I'm also part of the technical advisory panel of the Ministry of Environment. Both these are forums which have in the past...
Did you communicate these concerns?
I have not communicated anything formally because I have not seen anything formally. My proposal to the ministry in our last meeting was that please formulate a group of 3-4 lead experts from this country, maybe 1 or 2 people from the international scene who should be there to internally review that. I don't even mind if they pay them a few $100s or something like that. The policy, they should get that type of technical feedback. What happens is they send it to an institution, it scribbles a few things and they say, oh, we've gotten enough feedback. That's not feedback. It's very serious business. I mean, you're setting the stage for the next 25 years.
Were you heard by the ministry?
I made my point. I was told that this is a good point, and yes, we will develop that type of review process, and let's see how it comes through.
What what opportunities the global agenda of climate change is offering to Pakistan, and to what extent Pakistan has benefited from them?
I think not only to Pakistan, South Asia in general will be offered a major chunk of the money. And as I said earlier, that it's 30 billion to start with, hopefully building up to 100 billion. There is a lot of money which is also going to be filtered through the private sector, through CDM, through these other countries which are trying to sort of participate in the mitigation process. Money can be standing somewhere. To grab that money or to get access to that money, you have to have the intellectual capacity to develop proposals, to have institutions to foster and facilitate that money. I personally don't feel that I think both those areas are very severely lacking.
You say that there are not even 1 dozen experts on climate change. So how, in this backdrop, we could fill that gap?
I think, what you do is you start off with an institution. An institution which people can develop trust in. Like we have this center, the Global Impact Study Center, on a very small scale, on a very narrow focus. I think they do a fairly decent job on the research part. We need to have a stage which, if somebody comes from outside, Shahzad Sahab, he wants to write a check for Pakistan for $500 million to do something on climate change. Who do you think could be recommended to take that money and do something in Pakistan? You don't have an institution. You have ministries. You say that, okay, give it to a particular ministry or let the money come through the foreign ministry for that matter. Nobody internationally is willing to take that bet on. You have to have the institutional structure for that.
This DFID project, CTKN, I visited the website and they are helping developing countries in the areas of climate change. Can't they help Pakistan, or why Pakistan is not benefiting from their offer?
I think networks or forums like CDKN, they will become the vehicles of facilitation. They will very rapidly help build capacity. They will help synthesize ideas which are relevant to this part of the world, and they will help in the strategy. These forums cannot be a substitute for institutions that will implement adaptation particularly.
Okay.
For Pakistan, the core issue is adaptation. It is not mitigation. If you have 100 rupees to allocate, maybe 20, 25 rupees get allocated to the mitigation portion. It is that 75 rupees which you need to develop capacity for your adaptation, which is going to be Pakistan's main, I think, future challenge basically. If you don't do that, you will have lot more people dying than you have seen recently. It's only $10.7 billion loss on this particular flood. I think the future floods which will come or the future droughts which come, the cost will be much higher than this if you do not adapt.
Thank you very much.